Week 7 of college football is here, and we're ready to break down some marquee matchups for the weekend heading into what is shockingly almost halfway through the season. I'm Nathan Johnston here with my co-host Brad Hopkins. It's time to break the huddle. Brad, as I mentioned in the intro, week 7 already. It just seems like we just started college football, and here we are almost halfway through the season, and yet, I don't know if I can sit down and say that we have a true leader in college football in terms of who looks elite and who looks good. But maybe that'll change this weekend. We've got top matchups such as Ohio State versus Oregon, Texas versus Oklahoma, and so many more. So, Brad, let's not waste anyone's time. Our records just stand. Brad, you are currently 19-17, I believe. I'm 14-16, trying to get above 500. Or 16-20, excuse me. Good grief. I got a long ways to go. And then Rooster, shockingly, 22-14. But hey, maybe we can gain some track on him this weekend. Let's not waste anyone's time. Like I said, let's jump right into it. We've got a Thursday night matchup at 7:30 on ESPN2, where the Coastal Carolina, and I believe I pronounced their mascot right, the Cantaliers or something?
Yeah, the Chanticleers.
Chanticleers go on the road to take on the James Madison Dukes. And Brad, this is a really exciting matchup. Two programs that are kind of making a name for themselves in the FBS. James Madison most recently under Kirk Cignetti, who has left to go be the head coach this year at Indiana. And we see what he's doing at Indiana so far. So, look, hopefully he left that program in good hands. Like I said, Thursday night kickoff, 7:30 on ESPN2. James Madison currently favored by 9.5 in this one at Bridgeforth Stadium in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And Harrisonburg, Virginia, by the way, an electric atmosphere. We saw the Pat McAfee show go up there last year, and just the energy behind that crowd. It's something special. And that's what I love about college football. Going to these smaller college football towns that truly thrive based on this sport and the weekends throughout the fall around these games. But Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Enough talking from me. Who do you have coming out and winning this game? And I believe it's a Sun Belt matchup, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Nate. Really a fun game. Of course, Coastal Carolina a couple years ago under now NC State quarterback Grayson McCall, they were kind of the hot team, and I won't say they cooled off, but they've definitely they're definitely still playing well. Of course, they're Jamie Chadwell left there a few years ago. They're under head coach Tim Beck. I believe this is his second year, maybe his third year, but he's doing a great job. But yeah, James Madison, such a fun program. You mentioned Kirk Cignetti in the in the introduction. He's doing a great job. Nate, I'm a big fan of their new head coach Bob Chesney. He came from Holy Cross, and there was a lot of people wondering where in the world that is, and he's done a great job. They're 4-1. Of course, their big upset. They put 70 on North Carolina. This has been an explosive offense. They did lose last Saturday in a little bit of an upset against UL Monroe. This is going to be a fun one. I always love these kind of smaller conference Thursday night matchups. I'm going to take the Dukes in this one. It's in Harrisonburg. That you mentioned, it's going to be an electric atmosphere. I remember College Game Day being there last year, and it was just so much fun. That James Madison campus was electric. But I think their quarterback, Barnett, who's done a really good job, he's the difference in this one. Home crowd advantage as well. It's going to be a great atmosphere. Give me the Dukes in this one.
Yeah, Brad, you mentioned both teams coming into this game 4-1, and both teams are looking for a big win in the Sun Belt. We know that the group of 5 is competing all together for that one spot in the playoff this year with the expanded playoff. Maybe one of these teams makes a jump and later on in the season, and we see someone like these two slip into the playoffs. For this game specifically, though, I want to look at two guys. On Coastal Carolina, Ethan Vasco. Vasco, he's off to a really good start. Against Old Dominion, he passed for over 360 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's got 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions on the year. So hasn't, put up huge numbers, but he's playing efficient. He's playing well enough to keep his team in these games. And you look at the other side, and Alonzo Barrett, as you mentioned, just tearing it up. I mean, he's got 10 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns passing, excuse me, and he's rushed for 3 in a 2-game span. That's pretty dang good if you ask me. In the end, though, I think this atmosphere at James Madison is going to be really, really electric. Those fans are going to show up even on a Thursday night because I guarantee you, Harrisonburg, Virginia, this is one of those towns that shuts their town down for these games. So give me James Madison. I think that program is still doing something special up there in Virginia, and I think they're going to continue on Thursday night. So give me James Madison, and I think they cover the spread too. Let us know down in the comments who you think is going to win this vital Sun Belt matchup. Our next matchup of the week takes us out to the hot state of Arizona in Tempe, Arizona, where the number 16 Utah Utes hit the road to take on the Arizona State Sun Devils. That's a tongue twister right there. Friday night kickoff at 10:30 p.m. on ESPN, primetime matchup on Friday night. A little bit later than expected, but nonetheless, we're going to be up and ready for this one. Utah currently favored in this one by 6.5 points heading into Mountain America Stadium, like I mentioned, in Tempe, Arizona. Brad, what a great matchup. Both teams enter this contest 4-1. Kenny Dillingham has just done a phenomenal job turning that program around slowly but surely. This is going to be a big test for him and his team at home against a very, what I would consider, unpredictable Utah team. Brad, I'll hand it over to you. Everyone wants to know, and Brad, I know you've got the answer to this one. Will Cam Rising actually play?
Yeah, Nate. I mean, that's the $1 million question because Utah goes as far as as Cam Rising would take them. But bottom line, he's got to stay healthy. I was reading some stuff today, trying to get a feel, and Kenny Dillingham even came out in his in his weekly press conference saying, "Hey, we're going to be prepared for both of them." I think it's still up in the air. Their backup, Isaac Wilson, has been serviceable. He's been okay, but he's still a very, very, very young player. He's still growing and developing. So, I mean, his health is a big question mark. And Nate, I mean, it's crazy to think about that Cam Rising. I mean, it feels like he's been at Utah for 10 years. It feels like that, he was there when Urban Meyer was coaching Utah, and that was in the mid 2000s. But he's just been there, absolutely forever. I'm interested to see if they end up trying to get a medical waiver for him to play next year. Who knows? But you mentioned Kenny Dillingham. What a job he's done at Arizona State. That's his alma mater. I'm a big fan of this guy. He has just really turned that program around. Herm Edwards, of course, left a mess. I believe it was that they had self-imposed bans last year, and they've just completely turned around. And really, Arizona State, it starts and ends with their great running back, Cam Scatabo. Very, very talented. Their quarterback, Sam Levitt, has also done a really good job, a Michigan State transfer. I am really, really high on the Sun Devils. They've got a good staff there to recruit. Arizona, they're in a unique position that they can go get players from the state of Arizona. They can hit California. They're going to use the transfer portal. I'm just a big fan of this Arizona State program. But Nate, for me, that this comes down to this Utah offense, and it's so much different than the Big 12. We're used to seeing these high-flying offenses. Utah still runs a pro-style system. They play good defense. For that reason, I think Utah wins this one. Look, I think Arizona State keeps it very, very close. I think Utah only wins this one by 3 or 4 points, and that's just because of the uncertainty at quarterback. I'm taking the Utes, and I think it's going to take a late fourth quarter score for them to get the win in Tempe on Friday night.
Yeah, Brad, you bring up so many key points, and excuse me, to your point, I keep saying to your point, but this is a vital matchup in the Big 12, right? We talked about the matchup just a second ago in the Sun Belt versus James Madison and Coastal, but this is a big one. We got Utah playing Arizona State. We've got, and we're going to talk about in a minute, we've got Arizona playing BYU on the road, and then we've got, I believe, Colorado plays Kansas State. So the Big 12 is up for grabs. Any of these teams that come out this weekend are going to have the edge moving forward with the rest of the second half of the season heading into week 8 next week. And yeah, I think It's a coin flip in this one. I understand that Utah is favored by 6.5 points. I have to think that's due to their experience on defense and the Utah just culture. They just grind, and they find ways to win. They've struggled a little bit this year, sure, but you have to give them the edge. They're the more consistent on both defense and offense overall. I hate to say this, but I don't hate to say it, but I have to go with the Utah Utes as well. I know that the fans don't necessarily like us picking the same teams every time, but look, we're picking the win. So I'm going to take the Utah Utes, but I do think Arizona State covers. I think this is a much closer matchup than most people probably give it credit for. Let us know down in the comments who you think is going to run away with this one in Tempe, Arizona. We're going to head back out to the East Coast in a quote-unquote ACC matchup. What a weird matchup this is for the ACC, obviously with Cal being the newcomer in the ACC, where the Cal Golden Bears hit the road to take on the number 22 Pitt Panthers in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at a Kreischer Stadium. I believe I pronounced that right. 3:30 kickoff on ESPN, and Pitt currently favored by 3 in this one. Brad, this is an interesting matchup, like I said. East Coast versus West Coast, however you want to put it, but nonetheless, they're both in the ACC. Cal has showed snippets of greatness, in my opinion. I wouldn't say greatness, but they've shown that they can play ball and they can play with the best of the best. They obviously give up a devastating lead to Miami this past week. Now they got to travel all the way across the country to Pittsburgh to play the Pitt Panthers, who are rolling underneath the covers, so to speak. They're 5-0. Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Thoughts on this game and who comes out on top in this ACC matchup?
Yeah, Nate, absolutely. Thank you. First of all, I hope all of the Cal fans, if you have traveled, I hope that you signed up for, travel credit card, because man, those Sky Miles points are kicking in right now. I mean, you're talking about trips to Auburn, trips to Tallahassee, Florida, and now trips to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Man, I hope y'all get some travel points. If you want to share some, I'm open for them. But yeah, Nate, starting off with Cal, a tough loss against Florida State a couple weeks ago, and then I was really, really impressed. I watched the whole game last week against Miami. College game day was there. It was actually a really, really good atmosphere. I was impressed with Cal. They went toe-to-toe, and Nate, I'll be honest, man, thanks to some questionable calls, Miami kind of escaped that game to an extent, I would say. Of course, Cal is led by Fernando Mendoza. He's a very, very good quarterback. Jaden Ott it seems like he's finally healthy. They're figuring things out. I like what Cal is doing. I do think, Nate, I'll be honest, I know we don't talk about this a whole lot. It's not really said, but look, all these schools, from California having to travel to the East Coast and vice versa, and same thing for those schools in the West traveling the Big Ten. Man, it does take a toll. You may not think it, but it does. I mean, when you've got a 3.5 or 4 hour trip, one way, man, it takes a toll on you. And so I think you're seeing that a little bit from Cal, and I think they're going to manage it fine. But I think they're definitely discovering the ACC is a good conference, and to me, Pitt has probably been one of the stories of the ACC. I am just so impressed with their new offensive coordinator, Cade Bell. He has come from Western Carolina, has completely turned that offense around. But Nate, the story for me is Eli Holstein. This was a highly recruited kid. He signed with Alabama. Saw the writing on the wall that he had some other guys in front of him. Of course, most notably, Jalen Milroe transfers up to Pitt. And what does he do? He's putting up fantastic numbers, 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, 3 picks. He's their second leading rusher. And they have a loaded running back room. Their leading rusher, Reed, transferred with his offensive coordinator from Western Carolina. So I am a big, big fan of this Pitt program. Pat Narduzzi has always had good teams. Of course, last year they really, really struggled. Of course, they were hit hard by the portal for a few years in a row. But I say all that to say I'm taking Pitt. I think Pitt wins this one by double digits.
Wow. Yeah, Brad, you bring up so many good points, and I got to find a different saying besides Brad. You have some great points. We'll work on that over the weekend. But no, this game is interesting because Cal, as I mentioned before, has shown that they can play with the big boys. I mean, they play with Miami, and you can say what you want about Miami. Miami had to go all the way to Cal. I believe the equipment truck for Miami. I think it took them 44 hours to get from Miami to Cal. I'm curious to see how far it is for Cal's equipment truck to get to Pitt, but nonetheless, this is a how they say a battle of attrition. Cal's coming off of a heartbreaking loss. Now they got to travel all the way across the East Coast. And look, those big boys on the plane, I don't care how much leg room you give them. It's a long flight. It's a long day for them. Then they got to hop on a bus, go to the hotel, sleep in a bed that they may not be comfortable in, get up the next day and prepare for a 3:30 kickoff, which, if I'm not mistaken, would probably be about 10:30, 12:30 Pacific time. But still, I mean, it's early for them. Usually they're playing at 10:30 Eastern. So I don't know where I got 10:30 from. I'm going to get some hate in the comments for that one, but nonetheless, it's a lot. And you mentioned Eli Holstein. He has just been an absolute dog for the Pitt Panthers, and no one really expected him to do much. The coming out game was against West Virginia. I think I picked West Virginia in that game, and boy, was I proven wrong. So for this game, I'm going to take the Pitt Panthers. I think Pitt has proven themselves. I think they got the home field advantage. Eli's going to be showing out, probably throwing for 400 yards against this Cal defense. And no disrespect to Cal, but it's tough. They like I said, they come off a big loss. Now they got to travel all the way across the country and play a very dominant Pitt team that's 5-0, riding high. Could be wrong, but give me the Pitt Panthers in a close one. I think that it is under double digits, but I think Pitt wins. Let us know down in the comments who you think is going to come out with this ACC matchup out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Our next matchup takes us back out northwest to Provo, Utah, the beautiful city of Provo. We talked about them earlier in the season, Brad, and although we picked a bit against this team, the Arizona Wildcats hit the road to take on the number 14 BYU Cougars. And Brad, like I mentioned, we picked against the Cougars last time we picked a BYU game, and they proved us wrong, and they hated us in the comments. So we're going to see who we choose this week. 4 o'clock kickoff on Fox Saturday afternoon, Big 12 showdown. BYU currently favored in this one by 4.5 points heading into Lavelle Edwards Stadium. If you ever get a chance, I said this before, I'll say it again. Get out to Provo, Utah. It's absolutely breathtaking out there. The views from the stadium, the mountaintops, just spectacular. And the sun should be setting shortly into the fourth during this game. Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Arizona's already proven that they can beat an undefeated Big 12 in conference. I was going to say rival, but in conference matchup against Utah earlier. Now they go on the road to take on another undefeated Big 12 team in BYU. Thoughts on this game, and can Arizona get an upset?
Yeah, this is interesting because BYU has really taken the Big 12 by storm. No one was predicting them to be undefeated up until this point and leading the Big 12. And that you talked about a few weeks ago here on the channel. We picked the BYU Kansas State game. We all thought that, hey, Kansas State's going to roll. And look, BYU won. Kansas State also made a lot of mistakes. But, BYU, I mean, it's just a solid football team. I mean, I don't know that I necessarily pick out one guy. Defensively, they have 10 sacks. They have 7 interceptions as a team. I mean, they play team defense. Of course, I guess kind of their quote-unquote headliner is quarterback Jake Ratzlaff, 12 touchdowns on the year to 5 picks. He's their leading rusher. Nate, it's interesting to me. He's their leading rusher, and he has 34 carries for 156 yards. So they're not this dynamic, running game. I wouldn't even say they have a dynamic offense. They're just a solid football team. And then jumping over to Arizona, I'm a big fan of Arizona. Brent Brennan has come in there. He's done a good job. Of course, he's got some big shoes to fill, man. Jed Fish did an incredible job last year. Noah Fafita and Tatoria McMillan are just an unbelievable 1-2 punch. Nate, I'm going to go with the upset here. I still like Arizona. They've had some bumps in the road, I was really, really shocked last week when Texas Tech beat them, and I think Arizona gets it right this week, and I just think it's BYU's time to lose. So I'm going to take the Wildcats in an upset on the road.
Wow, Brad. Wow. Taking the underdog, or I guess in this case, the undercat, so to speak. No pun intended, but maybe it was intended. Brad, it's interesting this matchup. It's very intriguing. Like I said before, in the last Big 12 matchup that we discussed between Utah and Arizona State, this is another matchup in the Big 12 that's really intriguing. Either one of these teams could come out with a win and take their win into the next week, leading the Big 12. I mean, this is big for BYU, and I'm surprised, although I'm not surprised that this wasn't game day, but nonetheless, I want to mention one guy in particular. You mentioned the quarterback for BYU leading the team in rushing. Well, that could change very quickly, Brad, as LJ Martin comes back from injury. He's been out since week 2, has only put in 18 carries this season, but last year he averaged 5 yards per carry. This could bolster that BYU offense and what has already been a fantastic matchup thus far. I'm going to go with the favorites in this one. I picked against BYU last time, and I would be very foolish if I picked against them again. So I'm going to take the BYU Cougars. Look, I've learned this over the years. You never want to bet against a school that's playing for religion, because they're always playing for something much bigger than their team. And I think BYU, they're special this year. This is the Cinderella story that we've all been waiting for. I think the last time probably would have been Cincinnati, but I don't know if you would consider that a Cinderella or a nightmare. But nonetheless, give me the BYU Cougars. I think Arizona keeps it close, but they're just too sporadic. I can't. They're very bipolar. One game they're throwing for 400 yards, and next they can't do anything. So I got to take the more consistent team in this one. Give me the BYU Cougars. Let us know down in the comments who you think comes out on top in Provo, Utah, Saturday afternoon. I almost said night. We're going to head further out west to Fresno, California, where the Washington State Cougars hit the road to take on the Fresno State Bulldogs in Valley Children's Stadium. 7 p.m. kickoff on Fox Sports 1, and Washington State currently favored on the road by 3.5 points in this matchup. Both teams looking to make the next move. Washington State, obviously still in what we would consider the Pac-2, was left out at the end of the year going anywhere. Now we hear rumors of Fresno State potentially coming to the Pac-12 to revitalize that conference. So this is an interesting matchup in its own right. It's also very intriguing because Fresno State's coming off of a devastating loss against UNLV last week. They're looking to bounce back after starting 3-2. Washington State, I think, heads into this game at 4-1. They're looking to continue on the road to win. Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Thoughts on this game and who comes out on top in Fresno?
Yeah, and Nate, I believe both of these teams are coming off a loss last week. Of course, Fresno State blown out against UNLV. Washington State against Boise State, and Gentry, the Boise State running back, is still running. I think. I mean, crazy what he's done, but I digress. Nate, I'm going to keep this one pretty short and sweet. Fresno State's got a good program. Of course, they went through some coaching changes at the beginning of the year, really close to the start of the season. So I still think you're seeing a team trying to figure things out. Their quarterback, Mikey Keene, has been very inconsistent. 7 touchdowns, but 6 picks. He's got to get it figured out. But Nate, what stands out to me is if you look back at that game last week, Fresno State against UNLV, what to me was the difference was Fresno State could not contain UNLV dual threat quarterback Hajeek Williams. And Nate, Washington State features one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country in John Mateer. We've talked about this guy several times here on the channel. I'm a big fan of him. Nate, that's simply what it comes down for me. I think he has a big day. I think he has over 200 passing, 100 rushing. I think this Washington State defense is going to take it personal that that they were ran all over last week, and they come out. I'm taking the Cougars in this one and the over.
Yeah, Brad, I've got 2 words for this game. John Mateer. Look, this guy, as I mentioned several times, beautiful head of lettuce, gray hair, carries on the tradition for Washington State. Give me the Washington State Cougars big in this one. All credit to Fresno State and what they're building there, but it's clear to me that Washington State has this team outnumbered in every aspect of the game. Could be wrong, but I know we're going to hear from Fresno State, so bring it on. Give me the Washington State Cougars in a blowout. I think they win by double digits in this one. Let us know down in the comments who's going to win this Pac-2 versus Mountain West matchup in Fresno, California. And that brings us to our game of the week. My favorite matchup every single year. We're heading out to Dallas, Texas at the Cotton Bowl, where the number 1 Texas Longhorns, newly number 1, take on the number 18 Oklahoma Sooners. Such a rich traditional matchup every single year that we see this game, Brad, and this one's going to be no different. I get it. Texas is favored by 14.5 in this one, but I guarantee you Oklahoma is going to come out swinging. These two teams absolutely hate each other, and they want nothing more than to ruin each other's season. 3:30 kickoff on ABC/ESPN Plus. Brad, the question on everyone's mind, how will Quinn Ewers look in his first game back after getting injured, and can he survive 4 quarters to keep his Texas Longhorns at the number 1 spot in their first year in the SEC, or will the Oklahoma Sooners spoil their playoff run? Brad, I'll turn it over to you. Thoughts on this Cotton Bowl year and who comes out on top in the Red River rivalry?
Yeah, absolutely, Nate. Thank you. Yeah, man, I feel like we could have done a 45-minute episode just talking about this game and all the storylines. Nate, I want to start off talking about Oklahoma, of course. It's such an interesting year and an interesting Oklahoma team, because what do you think about when you think about Oklahoma? You think about throwing the ball all over the field, explosive offenses, great quarterback play, fast receivers, and not to say that they don't have that, but Nate, it's been a weird year. Oklahoma's, of course, um, transitioned to a new offensive coordinator. Everyone thought, and that's including me, that Jackson Arnold was just going to be the next great Oklahoma quarterback, and he was benched. I think Michael Hawkins has brought some stability, but they're still trying to figure out what he brings to the table. I will say Brent Venables, he's done a good job. He's got Oklahoma playing good defense, and Nate, we know that's what it takes in the SEC. Um, this one is just such an intriguing rivalry, Nate, because you mentioned it with these rivalry games, man. You throw everything out the window. It doesn't matter if a team comes in undefeated and another one comes in with a losing record. The passion and the hatred that these two teams have, it's going to make for a great game. Jumping over to Texas, I am a huge fan of Steve Sarkisian, and Nate, you mentioned in the lead up in our introduction to this week's episode, and I totally agree with you, man. There's no team that set itself apart yet, but I do think Texas is the favorites for them to be national champions. There's a reason they're number 1. They're the most balanced team that we've seen on both sides of the ball, and I would say, this Saturday is going to be their first big test. So many storylines. I want to real quickly start off on defense. Anthony Hill Jr., he's a sophomore. He's just so dynamic. 2.5 sacks. He's good against the run. He's good in coverage. He's so exciting. Their true freshman linebacker, Colin Simmons, he's got 4 sacks. Nate, we talked about Texas last year, and I remember specifically us talking about Texas after the Alabama game last year, and we said that's an SEC level defensive line. I don't know that they have quite that level of defensive line this year, but it's still a really, really strong defense. And then jumping over to offense, you mentioned Quinn Ewers, Nate. One of the storylines that I'm intrigued about is, look, Arch Manning has played really, really well in his couple of starts. He was a little bit shaky at times, did throw some picks, but I would say overall it was, he passed it with flying colors. Nate, I'm really intrigued. Do they have a series or two for him, a half to get him some playing time? Do they have some design runs? Because we saw that he's definitely a threat. So that's an intriguing storyline for me. Then also throw back, do they try to, get him some series so Quinn won't get re-injured? Of course, Texas has a big showdown with Georgia next week, so that's an intriguing one. The other guy I want to mention, and I feel like he's flying under the radar a little bit because we've got two very, very good freshman wide receivers, Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, and then, of course, Ryan Williams, who, if you haven't heard, he's 17 years old from Alabama. But Texas has got a really, really good freshman receiver in Ryan Wingo. They've got Golden, they've got Alabama transfer Isaiah Bond. Texas has got weapons. I think that's where the difference is. Texas has just got too many weapons. I think Quinn Ewers is going to be jacked to play this one. And I'm kind of, giving my opinion here, obviously, but I think Arch Manning, I think they do find some ways to get him on the field. Nate, it's a rivalry game. Like I said, the passion, it's going to be so much fun. This is one of my favorite games of the year. I think it's close in the third quarter, but I think Oklahoma's lack of offense, Texas just attacking style on defense, it wears Oklahoma out. And eventually these playmakers for Texas take over. And Texas, I'm going to take Texas in this one, and I'm going to take them in the over. I think Texas wins this one by about 17 points and sets up a really big showdown, of course, with Georgia coming to Austin next week. But give me the Horns in this one.
Yeah, Brad. Entering this game, I can't believe I'm saying this, but who would ever thought that we'd be looking at this Texas-Oklahoma matchup and saying who's going to win in the trenches? I mean, that sounds like an LSU-Alabama preview mid-2000s, but here we are. Oklahoma's defense is nasty. They've allowed less than 25 points per game this year, and then you look at Texas, and they've held their opponents to under 13 every game. Then you look at the offenses. Obviously, Oklahoma struggled early on. They made the switch at quarterback to Hawkins Jr., who – as electric as he is, has only thrown one touchdown pass. He hasn't done anything spectacular. He can use his legs. Can Texas stretch the field? Can they keep him contained and force him to throw? Because that's going to be the key. They've got to keep him contained, and they got to force him to throw. You let him outside the pocket, you let him get on his feet and take off running. That's going to be a long day for the Texas Longhorns. Nonetheless, again, I want to mention this and emphasize this. It's going to come down to who's better up front. And right now, that's the Texas Longhorns. They have the better offensive line, and they have the better defensive line, in my opinion. Defensive line, maybe not by as much, but they definitely have that veteran leadership on the defensive side of the ball. Their secondary is playing well. To your point on the offensive side, interesting to see how Quinn Ewers comes out in this game. Does he look shaky? Does he look confident? Does he look like the old Quinn Ewers, or does he look skittish? That's going to be another key to the game. But in the end, I'm going to take the Texas Longhorns. I'm going to stick with my gut. They're setting up for a huge primetime matchup next week against the Georgia Bulldogs coming into town in Austin. Hook them this week. Let's see how both of these teams come out and perform. But look up front in the trenches. That's who's going to win this. Whoever wins trenches is going to win this game. Taking the Texas Longhorns. Let us know down in the comment who you think is going to come out on top in this year's Red River rivalry in Dallas, Texas at the Cotton Bowl. Be sure to subscribe down below. Give this video a like. Share it with your friends. We'll see you next week. It's time to break the huddle.